Hey there, it's Samuel Larsen here from growgurus.com. Now let's look into how to measure website speeds, or especially e-commerce speeds. But first of all, just a tiny bit of theory, because this will help relating that practical part into what matters and help it understand how it works. So I'll soon screen share exactly how this works. But first of all, there's basically two buckets of sites that you need to understand so that you can actually start optimizing. So first bucket is ones where you host the site, and the second is where the platform hosts the sites. So if you have a server yourself, you are in this first bucket. If you are using Shopify, BigCommerce, you are on the second bucket, because Shopify BigCommerce will basically handle the hosting. This is important because there's two delays basically that happen. So your site can be delayed because of the server or because of the assets that you are loading from the server. So that's important to understand. Now let's take Shopify for example. There's basically three things that can slow Shopify sites down, because you already have the server, so the server is taken care of by Shopify, so that should be fast, and they have servers all over the world, so it generally works really well. Now let's look into this. So the three buckets here are assets. This is your images, videos, fonts, texts, etc. So everything that's loaded to show the visitor. Second is your code. This is different from your assets because they're not images, videos, fonts, or that kind of thing. It is that like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Ideally, you'd load as little code as possible and load it once so it's smooth. So first things, obviously on the page, you would load first so that it looks like the whole page is loaded for the user. And then that like last thing in the footer doesn't matter that much if it's loading fast or not. Third thing, in Shopify especially, are the apps. So these need to be loaded to the user's computer in order for the site to function. So that can take a lot of time. And for that, these are the most common things that load Shopify stores load times. People get a little bit too trigger happy on the App Store and end up ruining their store basically. And even if you uninstall some of these apps, they will still leave the code behind, so it's not a full uninstall. Okay, stay with me here. Just a couple more things. We're going to jump into the screen share very soon. But why is this important? Obviously, direct impact to the conversion rate. If you have ever been on a slow mobile network, you know how painful it can be to try to navigate multiple pages on a slow site. So you're gonna get a lot of people frustrated if it's slow. You're gonna get a lot of bounces, first of all, from the page, even from the landing page. And then it's not just going to be a one-page thing. People will need to load 5 to 7 pages on average to buy. And if each is taking a long time, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. People are very, very speed oriented these days, and they are very much impatient. Alright, so those are the two things. Obviously, speed itself doesn't matter at all. You're looking for the business impact here. And conversion rates in mobile have partly increased, not only because people have got more used to buying on their phone, it has got easier, but partly because of the faster networks. So it's just more pleasant, and it's something you can do. If you're in a rush, you want to be able to do it fast. Now, there's not a lot of things that we can say that 100% certainty this will improve the site. It is contextual, but site speed is one of these things that 100% will improve your conversion rates if you get your site speed lower. So lower the site speed, higher the conversions every time, all things being equal. So last thing, two key metrics here that we're going to go over. First, contextual paint versus full load time, and establishing a baseline. So first, contextual paint is going to be the one where you load a page and that's what you see. So it looks like the banner is loaded and every element on the header is loaded, and unless you scroll, everything's loaded. Full load time, my view, less important but still important, is when the entire site has loaded, or entire page in this case. So that's when you start seeing that load bar on the top of your mobile browser, for example. It's going to be there for a long time if your site has a lot of apps and a lot of elements. So that can deter some users that why is this taking so long? It's still not loading. So those are a couple things to keep in mind, and those will also be metrics that will show up on these tools. So good to understand. When we talk about establishing a baseline, we're talking about what the default should be. So if you're on Shopify, for example, you can take a look at the theme itself and see how fast that loads. And then there's a couple of different tricks there as well. So for example, you can look at an empty page with the apps and then see how that loads to get an idea of how much of this is from apps. And then you can also do this principle where you look at the whole and seeing a pie graph of the different elements. But alright, thanks for watching for the theory part. Let's jump behind my computer and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so I'm going to share with you 3 tools that you can use to get a better idea of your page speeds and your site speed in general. First of them is Pingdom, tools.pingdom.com. They have this search here where you can also select a location. I ran the test already, so saved you the waiting time, and here's the results for the front page of my agency. Now, this is the key part of the report itself, and the elements here are a performance grade, kind of like in the US you have your A to D and F score, and then you have page size, load time, and requests. So the load time is for this site to load fully, and there's a couple of different elements to it, but I'll get to it later on. Performance grade is an algorithmic score that Pingdom assigns. Page size is the total assets loaded in megabytes, and the requests is the number of so-called calls between the user's browser and the server itself. So it's every time the browser requests something, it's a request from the server, and the server will need to go and fetch that. A good general rule of thumb is to have a page size under 3 megabytes, have a load time under at least a few seconds, so this is way too long, and then have a request number that is below 120. Those are not absolute numbers because it's always a case-by-case basis. If you have a really simple site or very simple page, your request number would be smaller, your page size would probably be smaller, and as a result, likely your load time would be lower as well. Pingdom does give you this little overview here of what could be the things that you could improve. So you get this scoring grade. So I'm very strong here on growgurus.com about avoiding empty hrefs. And you don't need to know these per se yourself. As an entrepreneur, you don't want to get stuck with default little stuff like this. Rather, you can have this go to your developer who can take care of it. And here you can see both the content size by type and the requests. So this should be, in a sense, a aligned with your site structure. So if you have a lot of images on the site, you would expect that to be a little bit higher. If it's a lot of scripts, like elements behind drop-downs, different apps, etc., you would expect that the scripting to be a little higher, and then so forth onward. Now, you might also have things like YouTube here. So I have a YouTube player on the front page, and it's loading that every time. But in that case, most people have the YouTube player already loaded, so it's not going to be 1.2 megabytes every time somebody comes to the site. So it's good to keep that in mind. Here we can see also a graph of the load order, and you can look into this different criteria here. For example, content size or load time in this case would be relevant. So you can see which elements took the longest to load. So that's Pingdom. Very good overview in general on a page-by-page level. Little bit technical, but nothing too overwhelming for you. Now the next tool is going to be analytics. And here, the good news is that you can look at this from real life. So these are page timings. If you go to behavior, site speed, page timings, you'll get data from real users. Downside is that it can be a little bit difficult to compare, and it is looking backward. So if you make a site speed improvement, it won't show up until you gather the data for it. So that's the downside of analytics. But here, once you go to here, you'll be able to see a table. I always recommend the table view, because here you can then see and rank it according to page views. So once I apply that, I'll be able to see my average load time here was 12.5 seconds. So it's pretty much in line with Pingdom in terms of load time on the front page. So here, if I look for improvement opportunities, I can look at which pages have a high page views and high load times. So here, a few pages come to the front, basically all of these. Well, in this case, it's pretty much every page, but you'll be able to see that on your store, that some pages are way heavier than others. I've found that this page timings report is the best, but there's also speed suggestions and user timings report. User timings report may not show to you unless you have activated it. Generally, you can get a pretty good idea of the overview already, but if you want to improve the site speed, you'll have to attack it on a page-by-page level. So here certainly I can't be proud of these numbers, but at the same time, it's not a sales generating machine for me. So in an e-commerce store, you would need to have way lower numbers. The speed suggestions, in general, in analytics are not that useful. Pingdom will give you better page speed suggestions because Google Analytics is not really focused on page speed improvement. It is more a platform for tracking your Google ad results and other results. It will give you suggestions, and it will also give you a page speed score. So in this case, it's 75. So it's a little bit more lenient than Pingdom's 68. And there you should be able to click here to open these suggestions, but for some reason I don't seem to be able to do that right now. Either way, there has been issues with it. For example, in Shopify, it doesn't track the cloud hosting as well as it should be. It's basically trying to tell you to do things that are not optimal for Shopify. So take it with a grain of salt. Here, the last tool then is going to be thinkwithgoogle.com. And here you have the test my site tool. So this is mobile friendly or mobile first tool. So you can just enter your store URL here. It will take a little while to test the store. So here on the Think with Google, I'm getting 12 seconds. It's counting that on a 4G connection. I'd say in general,
it's actually good to think of it in terms of 3G still, because it's always good to think that it's going to take longer than you expect, so that you can think it from the perspective of the most in-pain user. Then I don't really believe this. So if I get it from 23.3 to 23.2, it's probably not going to boost my conversion rate by 8%, but according to Google and Deloitte, it will. They also give recommendations here. So never done this myself, but you can fill in your details. I'd say the most important things there is just the very first thing. So this is how long the page takes according to this. There's some rumors that Google is using tools like this to evaluate the site speed for SEO. There's no way of confirming it, because Google is never saying this, that, or another on these matters, but it could be. Now let's get practical with this, and let's compare an e-commerce store. So I'll take one of my old clients here, and you can see that they have some things going on. There's a search widget here, reviews widget here, and a little bit of customization. So in this case, I want to compare a so-called neutral page. So in this case, it can be a collections page, and just comparing that to a theme itself, see how long these apps are taking, how much it's going to bloat the load times. So what I'll do here is I'll go to the Shopify theme store, open some of those demo stores, so you can go and view the preview. I'll remove the preview widget, so you can see it's changing the theme URL, and then we can compare it in a more fair way, because now we're not loading that extra widget there. Then I'm going to use the same page basically. So in Shopify you can use the collections all, and here's the same principle. Then we'll just load the demo store to Pingdom and do the same for our store here. So you can see the principles are pretty same between the themes, and so it will be a fairly straightforward and fair test. Alright, and here are the results. So our store, performance grade 65, page size 2.3, 2.6, 214 requests. And this is the baseline here with the demo store. So they were 92, 1.1, 600 milliseconds, and 56. So you can see here how much it can bloat the store just to add the apps. So I'm sure that the page itself, when you look at it, it's very similar in terms of, there's a few different products, a few more products there on the page, but it's not like extremely bigger as it is on the actual results. So this is very common. You start off from something that is really good, and you end up with something that is a little bit more of a mess. So you'll have unnecessary requests here for sure, 214, and this was 56. So you went from 56 to 214, and meanwhile the load time increased by a couple of seconds. If we are looking for the reason here, so this is the URL of the store, and you can see the scripts are 1.3 megabytes, images 700 kilobytes in terms of size. And here on the demo store, images similarly 700, but scripts are only 200 kilobytes. So there's a huge difference there of 1.1 megabytes. And those are also the issues that are bloating the request a little bit here on the actual store, compared to the demo store, which only has 12 requests for scripts. So this is a kind of a way that you can do on your own store. See from the analytics which ones are the most popular pages, which ones have trouble, and then you can look into Pingdom as a second tool to find out what the actual issues are. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I know it's not the most interesting topic necessarily, but if you have made it this far, you've shown yourself that you have patience to deal with website speeds, and that's a good sign for your success going forward. Now, I'll link to 2 videos here on this YouTube end screen. Click one of them. There's more website speed optimizations there for you to enjoy. And take care. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you'll get more of these good videos delivered over to you.